Welcome to the P4 class. My name is Teacher John. Today I'm going to teach you Science, Primary 4, Term 1. In our previous lesson, we looked at the types of seeds. We said we have monocotyledonous seeds and dicotyledonous seeds. We looked at monocotyledonous seeds in details. We said monocotyledonous seeds are seeds with one cotyledon. We gave examples of monocotyledonous seeds. We said maize, wheat, sorghum, barley, oats, and so on. Sorghum, millet are examples of monocotyledonous seeds. Today we are going to look at parts of a maize grain. Parts of a maize grain. A maize grain has the following parts. It has the style scar, It has the style scar. Style scar is found here. Then we have the tester. This tester is also known as seed coat. We have the plumule. Then we have the cotyledon. We have the radicle, then lastly we have a part called stalk scar. We also have a part called endosperm. So we have endosperm, stalk scar, radicle, cotyledon, plumule, tester, and style scar. So these are the parts of a maize grain. Let's look at functions of every part. We have a part called tester or seed coat. The seed coat protects the inner parts of a maize grain. The seed coat or the tester protects the inner parts of a maize grain. We have another part called plumule. The plumule develops into a shoot system. We have a part called the radicle. The radicle develops into a root system. Cotyledon. The cotyledon absorbs the food from the endosperm and supplies it to the growing embryo. I repeat, the cotyledon absorbs the food from the endosperm and supplies it to the growing embryo. Then we have a part called endosperm. It stores food for the growing embryo. Then lastly we have a part called embryo. Embryo develops into a new plant. Now the embryo consists of the plumule and the radicle. The plumule and the radicle are known as embryo. So we said the plumule develops into a shoot system, radicle develops into a root system. So the embryo consists of the plumule and the radicle, therefore the embryo develops into a new plant. Next, we look at dicotyledonous seeds. These are seeds with two cotyledons. Dicotyledonous seeds are seeds with two cotyledons. We have examples of dicotyledonous seeds. We have beans, soybeans, groundnuts, cowpeas. I repeat. We have beans, soybeans, groundnuts, cowpeas. We have pigeon pea. We have avocado. We have mangoes. They are examples of dicotyledonous seeds. Why do you call them dicotyledonous seeds? They have two cotyledons. Then they can also ask you to give characteristics of dicotyledonous seeds. They have two cotyledons. Then they undergo epigynous germination. Then we also have characteristics of dicotyledonous plants. Dicotyledonous plants, they have a taproot system. Dicotyledonous plants have a taproot system. Dicotyledonous plants have, apart from having a taproot system, Dicotyledonous plants also have a network leaf venation. Dicotyledonous plants have a network leaf venation. So I wanted you to grasp at least two characteristics of dicotyledonous plants. We've been looking at dicotyledonous seeds. We've said these seeds have two cotyledons. They carry out epigeal germination. But I want us to look at dicotyledonous plants. These dicotyledonous plants, they have network leaf venation, then they have a taproot system. Let's look at parts of a bean seed. Parts of a bean seed. A bean seed has the tester. This tester is also known as seed coat. Seed coat. Seed coat. Now, then we have a part called plumule, cotyledon, then radicle. Tester protects the inner parts of a bean seed. The plumule develops into a shoot system. The radicle develops into a root system. Then the cotyledon stores the food for the growing embryo. Let's look at seed germination. What is seed germination? Seed germination is the development of a seed embryo into a seedling. Seed germination is the development of a seed embryo into a seedling. So when the seed embryo develops into a seedling, that process is called germination. Seed germination is the development of a seed embryo into a seedling. Seed germination is the development of a seed embryo into a seedling. Then we have conditions for seed germination. We have water, oxygen, and warmth. These are the three conditions for seed germination. For a seed to germinate, it needs water, it also needs oxygen, and lastly, moisture. This water, how is water important during seed germination? Water softens the tester. It softens the tester. Water softens the tester. Apart from softening the tester, water also dissolves stored food in the seed. Water dissolves stored food in the seed. Or you can simply say it softens the tester. It makes the tester soft for the radicle to pass. Then we have oxygen. Oxygen is used for respiration. It is used for respiration. They may ask you, how is oxygen important during seed germination? How is oxygen important during seed germination? Oxygen is used for respiration. Then lastly, warmth provides optimum temperature. Warmth provides optimum temperature. Warmth provides optimum temperature. Optimum temperature simply means the right temperature. Warmth provides the right temperature for the seeds to germinate, or it provides optimum temperature. Next, we look at types of germination. Types of germination. We have two types of germination. One is called epigeal germination, and two, we have hypogeal germination. Now, epigeal germination is the type of germination where the cotyledons come outside the soil. I repeat, epigeal germination is the type of germination where the cotyledons come outside the soil. Examples of plants which carry out epigeal germination, we have beans, we have groundnuts. They carry out epigeal germination. So when they germinate, the cotyledons come outside the ground. That's why we are saying they carry out epigeal germination. I want to repeat for the last time. Epigeal germination, the type of germination where the cotyledons come outside the ground. Then examples of plants which carry out epigeal germination, we have beans, groundnuts, soya beans, cowpeas, and so on. Then we have hypogynous germination. This is the type of germination where the cotyledons remain in the ground. Hypogynous germination is the type of germination where the cotyledons remain in the ground. Examples of plants that carry out hypogynous germination, we have maize, we have rice, then we have barley or oats, we have oats, we have barley, then we have wheat. We have sorghum, millet, and so on. They carry out hypogynous germination. Why do we say they carry out hypogynous germination? It is simply because the cotyledons remain below the ground. The cotyledons remain below the ground. That's why we are saying they carry out hypogynous germination. Next, look at growing crops. We have growing crops. This is another topic. We are done with the topic 1 of term 1. Now we are going on topic 2, which is growing crops. Now we have types of crops. We have cereal crops, legumes, vegetable crops, root crops, and fruit crops. We also have what we call stem tubers. Stem tubers. So we have around 5 types of crops, if not 6. We have 6 types of crops: cereals, legumes, vegetables, fruit crops, root crops, and stem tubers. What are cereal crops? Let's begin with cereal crops. These are crops that produce grains. Cereal crops are crops that produce grains. Examples of cereal crops: we have maize, millet, oats, rice, sorghum, millet, barley. All these are cereal crops. Maize, millet, oats, rice, sorghum, millet, and barley are the best examples of cereal crops. Why do we call them cereal crops? They produce grains. They produce grains. Then I ask you, why is a maize grain called a cereal crop? Why are maize called cereal crops? Maize are called cereal crops because they produce grains. Then we have what we call legumes. We have legumes. These are crops with root nodules. Legumes are crops with root nodules. Legumes are crops with root nodules. They may also ask you examples of legumes. We have very many examples of legumes, around 5 of them, if not 6. One, we have cowpeas. We have groundnuts. We have soya beans. We have pigeon pea. Then we have beans. But we also have another one called bambara nuts. Bambara nuts. So we have around 6 examples of legumes. We have cowpeas, the one you call cow, but it's not called cow, it is called cowpeas. Then we have pigeon pea. We have beans, soybeans, some people call it soya beans, bambara nuts, then we have walnuts. Then maybe we also look at characteristics of legumes. Legumes have 2 characteristics. One, they have root nodules. Legumes have root nodules. Then the second characteristic, they store their seeds in pods. They store their seeds in pods. Is that what I the word pod? So any plant that stores its seeds in pods, it qualifies to be a legume. Then any plant with root nodules, it qualifies to be a legume. In case you are asked, why are groundnuts called legumes? You can say groundnuts store their seeds in pods, or you can say groundnuts have root nodules. And those are the two characteristics of leguminous plants or legumes. Then we have a diagram showing the root of a legume. A diagram showing the root of a legume. And this diagram has what we call root nodules. This diagram has root nodules. So these root nodules are very important. Root nodules store nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Root nodules store nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Alright, we looked at a diagram showing a root of a legume, and there is a part called root nodules. These root nodules store nitrogen-fixing bacteria. Then, what's the role of nitrogen-fixing bacteria? Nitrogen-fixing bacteria fix nitrogen in the soil. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria fix nitrogen in the soil. Next, look at root crops. What are root crops? These are crops that store their food in the soil underground roots. These are crops that store their food in the soil underground roots. We have examples of root crops. We have carrots, we have beetroots, we have cassava, then sweet potatoes. We even have another one called turnips. Turnips. Turnips is written like that. It is spelled as Turnips. Turnips. So we have carrots, beetroots, cassava, turnips, and sweet potatoes. Those are examples of root crops. Why do we call them root crops? They store their food in the solid underground roots. So in case you are asked, why are carrots called root crops? Why are cassava, or why is cassava called a root crop? Cassava is called a root crop because it stores its food in the solid underground roots. Next, you look at stem tubers. Stem tubers are crops or plants that store their food in the solid underground stems. So there's a difference between root crops and stem tubers. Root crops store their food in the solid underground roots, while stem tubers store their food in the solid underground stems. We have examples of stem tubers. We have white yams and Irish potatoes. So don't confuse Irish potatoes with sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are root tubers, then Irish potatoes are stem tubers. Why are Irish potatoes called stem tubers? They store their food in the solid underground stems. That's why they are called stem tubers. Why are white yams called stem tubers? They store their food in the solid underground stems. That's why we are saying stem tubers are crops that store their food in the solid underground stems. As simple as that. Then they may also ask you, why is sugarcane not a stem tuber, yet it stores its food in the stem? Why is sugarcane not a stem tuber, yet it stores its food in the stem? The answer there you should write is sugarcane does not store its food in the solid underground stem. That's why it is not called a stem tuber. As much as sugarcane store their food in the stem, it does not qualify to be a stem tuber because it does not store its food in the solid underground stem. For it stores its food in the upright stem, which is above the ground. So it is not a stem tuber. Next, we look at annual crops. Annual crops. The word annual is A-N-N-U-A-L. Annual crops. What are annual crops? Annual crops are crops that grow and mature within a year. Annual crops are crops that grow and mature within a year. They grow and mature within one season. That's why they are called annual crops. They grow and mature within a year, or these are crops that grow and mature within one season. We look at examples of annual crops. We have beans, groundnuts, maize, wheat, rice, barley, oats, and so on, bambara nuts. So all legumes, all cereals, all root crops, all stem tubers fall under annual crops. Why are beans called annual crops? Beans grow and mature within a year. Why is rice called an annual crop? Rice grows and mature within a year. So I'm trying to emphasize the definition of annual crops. These are crops that grow and mature within a year. We have looked at examples of annual crops and why they are called annual crops. We move to perennial crops. Be careful with the spelling of the word perennial crops. Perennial crops are crops that are harvested year after year. Perennial crops are crops that are harvested year after year. Now, crops which are harvested yearly are called perennial crops. If you want to say that, you can also define perennial crops as crops that take more than 2 years to grow and mature. So they take many years. They can take 2, 3, 4, 5 years to grow and mature. If you cannot take that definition, you can take this one. These are crops that are harvested year after year. Every year we harvest them. The best example are bananas. Some of you were born when you have the banana plantation that you have at home. But the banana plantation that you have at home has never got used up. You keep on harvesting those bananas every year. Every year you harvest. As you harvest, others keep on growing to replace the one you have harvested. So crops that are harvested year after year are called perennial crops. Another best example are fruit crops like mangoes, oranges, pineapples, apples, avocado. All those are examples of annual crops. Perennial crops. Reason, they are harvested year after year. Every year you harvest mangoes, every year you harvest avocado, you harvest pineapples, you harvest oranges, and so on. Another example is tea. Tea is another example of a perennial crop. So in case they ask you, why is tea called a perennial crop? Tea is harvested year after year. Why are bananas grouped under perennial crops? Bananas are harvested year after year. So we have very many examples of perennial crops. We have bananas, we have coffee, we have sugarcane, tea, vanilla, cocoa, oranges, pineapple, avocado, and so on. So there are so many. I've just tried to categorize them. We have fruit crops. All fruit crops are perennial crops. All fruit crops are perennial crops. So, as we are mentioning, answers like oranges, pineapples, avocado, jackfruit, any fruit you can think of is under perennial crop. Reason, it is harvested year after year. Then we have tea, vanilla, cocoa. Though some of you say cocoa, but the correct pronunciation is cocoa. Then we have bananas, coffee, and sugarcane. Why they are called perennial crops? They are harvested year after year, or they are harvested yearly. Simple. Then let's look at garden tools. Garden tools. We have so many examples of garden tools. I've given you around 14 examples of garden tools with their uses. So the first one is a hoe. A hoe. A hoe is used for digging. People use hoes for digging. Apart from digging, a hoe can also be used for weeding. Weeding crops, then harvesting crops. We can harvest crops like cassava, sweet potatoes, Irish potatoes, white yams, using a hoe by digging those tubers out of the ground. So a hoe is used for digging, weeding and harvesting. Then we have another garden tool called a spade. A spade is used for loading manure or loading soil. Where do we load soil? We can load soil on a truck, we can load soil on a wheelbarrow, and so on. So farmers have trucks, have wheelbarrows. They can either load soil or they can load manure. That's what we are saying. A spade is used for loading manure or soil, either on a wheelbarrow or a truck or a lorry. Then number 3, we have a rake. A rake has 2 functions. One, a rake is used for leveling soil in a nursery bed. A rake is used for leveling soil in a nursery bed. A rake is also used for collecting weeds. A rake is used for collecting weeds in the garden. So after clearing land, you can use the rake to collect weeds. And that's how a rake is used as a garden tool. Then we have a wheelbarrow. A wheelbarrow is used for carrying manure, carrying soil, carrying harvested food, or carrying garden tools. So a wheelbarrow can be used for so many, we can use a wheelbarrow in so many ways. We can use it for carrying soil, carrying manure, carrying harvested food, carrying garden tools, and so on. Then we have another garden tool called a slasher. A slasher is used for cutting weeds or tall grass. A slasher is used for cutting weeds or tall grass. Then we have an axe. An axe is used for cutting big trees. I'm emphasizing here. An axe is used for cutting big trees. I'm underlining the word big. An axe is used for cutting big trees. If you just say an axe is for cutting trees, shall mark your answer wrong. So we say an axe is used for cutting big trees. Then we have a panga. A panga is used for cutting small trees. A panga is used for cutting small trees. I'm emphasizing the word small. A panga is used for cutting small trees. A panga can also be used for harvesting food, like maize, bananas can be harvested using a panga. Then we have a forked hoe. A forked hoe. A forked hoe is used for digging stony areas. A forked hoe is used for digging stony areas or rocky areas, or you can say hard soil. A forked hoe is used for digging stony areas, rocky areas, or it is used for digging hard soil. Then we have a watering can. A watering can is used for watering crops. A watering can is used for watering crops. Then number 10, we have a garden fork. A garden fork resembles the fork we use for eating food. They resemble. The only difference is that the fork we use for eating food is small. Then the garden fork is very big, just like a spade. So the garden fork is used for mixing manure. A garden fork is used for mixing manure. Then we have a garden tool called pickaxe. A pickaxe is used for digging rocky grounds or stony areas. A pickaxe is used for digging rocky grounds or stony areas. It's used for digging stony areas. Then we have a garden tool called sickle. A sickle is used for harvesting cereals. A sickle is used for harvesting cereals. A sickle is used for harvesting cereals. I gave examples of cereals like maize, millet, sorghum, rice, barley, wheat, and so on. Those are examples of cereals. So when you're harvesting cereals, we use a sickle. We can harvest wheat, we can harvest sorghum, we can harvest rice using a sickle. So we say a sickle is used for harvesting cereal crops. A sickle is used for harvesting cereal crops. Then we have a pruner. A pruner, also known as secateur, it is used for pruning. It is used for pruning, and the word pruning has single N. A pruner is used for pruning. Then we have a hand fork. A hand fork is used for light weeding. A hand fork is used for light weeding. A hand fork is used for light weeding, especially when you are weeding seedlings in a nursery bed. We use a hand fork. We use a hand fork for light weeding. especially when one is weeding seedlings in a nursery bed. So seedlings in a nursery bed are very weak, so you cannot use a hoe to weed. Instead, we use what we call a hand fork. It is very small, just like a trowel, but it has forks, like the normal fork we use for eating food. Then there's another one called trowel. A trowel is used for transplanting seedlings. A trowel is used for transplanting seedlings. So we've looked at garden tools and their uses. Garden tools and their uses. Those who have workbooks, you can look at the pictures of those garden tools. Those who have workbooks, please come to school and buy them. You'll get an opportunity of looking at how these garden tools look like. Then we look at care for garden tools. How do farmers care for their garden tools? One, farmers care for garden tools by keeping them in clean, dry places. Farmers care for garden tools by keeping them in clean, dry places. So after using the garden tools, you keep them in a clean, dry place so that they don't rust. Then number two, we can care for garden tools by replacing broken handles. Garden tools can be cared for by replacing broken handles. If you have an axe, if you have a hoe, if you have a pickaxe, if you have a rake and the handle breaks, you replace the broken handle. That one will ease your work. By so doing, you are caring for these garden tools. Then we have cleaning them after use. Cleaning them after use. So garden tools can be cleaned after use. So when you clean them after use, you are caring for garden tools. So after using garden tools, don't keep when they are dirty. Clean them, then keep them in a clean, dry place. Then number four, we can care for garden tools by painting them. This painting prevents these garden tools from rusting. Then lastly, number five, we can care for garden tools by sharpening them. Sharpening, there are some garden tools that are used for cutting. So when we sharpen them, we are caring for them. Sharpening cutting tools. Those ones that are blunt, we sharpen them to make them sharp. And when they are sharp, they ease the work that we are doing. Then we have how to prevent garden tools from rusting. How can farmers prevent garden tools from rusting? One, by keeping them in dry places. Keeping them in dry places. Don't add the word cool. Should be dry places. The marking point on the word dry. Some of you like adding the word cool, dry. A place which is cool has moisture. And a place with moisture, it means that moisture is one of the conditions for rusting. So cool places are suitable for rusting to take place. So we don't keep them in cool places. We keep them in clean, dry places. So the marking point is on the word dry. Then you can also prevent garden tools from rusting by painting them. That's why you see most garden tools are painted. You see wheelbarrows are painted. You see rakes are painted. You see forked hoe, they're always painted. Why do you paint them? To prevent them from rusting. Especially those ones which are metallic. Metallic garden tools are the ones that are painted. Why do we paint them? To prevent them from rusting. Then we can also prevent them from rusting by oiling them, especially moving parts of a machine, like a wheelbarrow. Inside the wheels of a wheelbarrow are supposed to be oiled or greased to prevent them from rusting and also to prevent friction. Then we have galvanizing them, then enameling them. We can enamel garden tools, we can galvanize garden tools. We cover them with paint using a machine. That method is called galvanizing or enameling. Then we have, maybe to explain more about enameling and galvanizing, like if a vehicle gets old, after it has been repaired, it can be renewed by enameling and galvanizing, when they spray paint on cars or iron sheets or metallic objects, like here at Train Up a Child, we tried to spray beds, metallic beds. So that's what we call enameling. So when you spray paint on a metallic object, it's called enameling or galvanizing. So garden tools can also be galvanized, and they can also enamel them to prevent them from rusting. Then we have conditions for rusting. We have oxygen, water or moisture, then warmth. Oxygen, warmth, then water or moisture. So these are the three conditions for rusting to take place. And how does painting prevent rusting from taking place? Paint cuts off oxygen, water. Paint cuts off oxygen and water from reaching the metal. So these are some of the conditions for rusting to take place. Conditions for rusting to take place, we say we have oxygen, water, or moisture. Those are the two conditions for rusting. Don't include moisture. Moisture is for germination. But rusting, the only two, oxygen and water or moisture. Then if they ask, how does painting prevent rusting of garden tools? Paint cuts off oxygen and water from reaching the metal. Then effects of rusting to garden tools. How does rusting affect garden tools? Rusting weakens garden tools. It makes garden tools weak. Rusting weakens garden tools. How does it weaken garden tools? Remember, rusting is a chemical change, so it wears off. It makes garden tools to wear and tear. That's why a metallic object that has rust is very weak and easy to break, because the moment it wears off, it becomes weak. Then rusting also makes garden tools blunt. Rusting makes garden tools blunt. Then the last one is advantages of rusting to crop farmers. How is rusting important to crop farmers? Rusting increases minerals in the soil. Rusting increases minerals in the soil. So that is the end of our lesson. Attempt the activities which are in your workbooks. If you don't have a workbook, please, transport is now open. Come to school and get yourself a workbook. Otherwise, thanks for attending this lesson. God bless you.